Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, No to Low Cost Collection Care. I am Danielle Fraser, Library Conservator at the Preservation and Conservation Laboratory, Heritage Library Division, NALIS. We ask you to keep your cameras off and your mics muted. You are invited to type your questions into the chat for the question and answer segment at the end of this webinar. Please note that the webinar resources document containing all of the links and references shared in this session will be emailed to you after the webinar. Let me introduce my co-facilitator, Anna Richardson Thomas. Mrs. Richardson Thomas has 8 years experience in preservation-related duties as a library assistant in the Heritage Library Division, Special Collections and Rare Books Room section. Currently, she serves as a Librarian 1 in the Preservation and Conservation Laboratory, PAC Lab, working with the Library Conservator to develop and implement the preservation goals of NALIS. Anna holds a Bachelor of Information and Library Science and an associate degree in Library and Information Studies from the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, or COSTAT. She holds a certificate in Business Management from the University of the West Indies Open Campus. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. Before we get into our topic, let me introduce our organization. The National Library and Information Systems Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, NALIS, is the country's coordinator of all library and information services. Beyond the Heritage Library, there are over 25 public libraries, 3 libraries in correctional institutions, libraries in secondary and primary schools, special libraries in several government agencies, all administered by NALIS. Please visit our website, www.nalis.gov.tt, for more information about our services. One of NALIS' key responsibility is to promote and preserve national heritage information. The Preservation and Conservation Laboratory is responsible for ensuring the overall longevity of library materials with attention to the Heritage Library and its collection of historical importance. The PAC Laboratory, which was officially commissioned in 2013, helps NALIS to fulfill its role as the International Federation of Library, Association, and Institution Preservation and Conservation, or IFLA PAC Regional Center for the English Caribbean speaking. NALIS is part of a network of 16 IFLA PAC centers around the globe with the aim of providing knowledge and expert advice on preservation and conservation practices within their region and to serve as IFLA's key area of work on safeguarding and promoting culture and heritage. We have continued our mission of raising awareness of preservation and conservation issues throughout preservation webinar series. In case you missed any of our previous webinars, we'll share the link to the NALIS YouTube page with you. Let me formally introduce my co-facilitator, Danielle Fraser. Danielle has been the Library Conservator and head of the PAC Lab since 2009. Danielle holds a Master of Science in Information Studies and a Certificate of Advanced Studies in Conservation of Library and Archival Materials from the University of Texas at Austin. She was a 2008 Conservation Fellow of the Library of Congress, Washington, D.C. She has been a member of the American Institute for Conservation and Library Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Danielle enjoyed presenting papers at meetings of ACUREL, CORAL, and IFLA. So I know she's excited to present to you today. Over to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Anna. We are excited to share these budget tips with you. Now, caring for library and archival collections need not be an expensive thing. However, please note that some suggestions may not be feasible for your institution in particular. It's also important to recognize that collection care is more than what we do to the collection item itself. Preventative measures across your entire collection can be more cost-effective than having to carry out repairs or conservation treatments on individual collection items. Now, borrowing from Robert Waller's risk management applied to preventative conservation, let's explore these tips using the levels of control, from the most exterior to the most interior. Consider the building. It is the first line of defense for our collections. In fact, if there's an issue with the exterior of your building, this can often result in problems with the interior. So we will first consider things we can do around our site or building. Then let's take a look at what we can do at the room level of control, where our collections are stored. And next, we will take a look at storage. Do not underestimate the impact storage decisions can have on your collections. Now, the next level of control is a collection item. Simple changes to how we store, handle, and use our collection items can have a big impact on their long-term preservation. And part of caring for collections effectively must include implementing policies and procedures which help further our preservation measures. So, starting from the most exterior is the site or building. It's important to know the history of your building. What are the structural issues or problem areas? Are there leaks in the roofing? Do you have foundational cracks? Are there large gaps under exterior doors or maybe doors that don't even close properly? What are the signs of trouble around your building? And in fact, are there any past occurrences of issues? Maybe these things occurred way long before you started working there. Remember, though your collection may be only on one floor, inside a particular room on that floor, issues on the exterior of your building can affect the health of your collection. So we recommend that you do regular walkthroughs, perhaps quarterly. This is a no-cost thing that you can do. Taking that time to examine the exterior and the interior of your building. In fact, it may save you money, as regular walkthroughs can help you identify issues from early on. You'll notice changes happening sooner than later, and then you can address the problems from an early stage before they become a huge crisis. And consider separating spaces for different activities within your institution. Are you able to separate the collection area from the occupied spaces for staff and clients? At the Heritage Library Division, we've moved special collections into its own space. This allows us to prioritize where we tighten control measures for environmental conditions as well as security, rather than having to emphasize that for the entire floor or even for the entire building. And one last thing about building that we want to make sure you consider would be to ensure proper airflow through the spaces. Do not block those supply vents or the return vents. It's really important, especially when spaces are changed. We might be moving shelving, adding walls, changing around furniture, etc. We want to be sure that when we do those changes, we do not block our air supply or the return vents. So we've mentioned a few things here. So let's get into them a little bit more. And let's hear from you. Before we continue to room level of control, we want to find out from you, which of these measures will you be willing to implement at your level, at your institution, sorry. So you'll see the poll on your screen. Go ahead and enter your choice. Will you consider exploring the history of your building, finding out, asking those questions? Are you going to do regular walkthroughs? Is it possible maybe to just separate spaces, move aside where staff are working from your collection areas? Click all that will be applicable and be able to be implemented at your institution. Thank you. So let's see. We're sharing the results, and you would see on your device that a majority, 71%, have said that they will implement regular walkthroughs. And that's one of the easiest things that we can do. We can just move around the space and make those observations. Second highest, 54%, explore history of the building. And then a few of you said that you could possibly separate spaces. Thanks so much for voting. So even if we can't change things on the exterior, because sometimes we may be occupying a space that doesn't belong to us, we're renting, we have to go through maybe a lot of bureaucracy with respect to how the space and the building is controlled. There are several things that we might be able to implement and control within the room level. So for instance, deterioration from light is cumulative and irreversible. No conservation treatment can ever restore the damage done by light. In fact, badly damaged light materials have to be replaced, as light damage often shows itself in two ways: fading and accelerated aging, or weakening, or embrittlement. Now, I encourage you to view our light webinar. We'll share the link in our webinar resources, which will be emailed to you. So the UV light in sunlight can be very damaging. So in the Rare Book Room of the Heritage Library Division, where our special collections are stored, we have added dark UV filtering film to the glass and blinds to the windows. So consider adding curtains, blinds, window films. These are things that you can consider. But if these are still out of your budget when you're thinking about reducing the sunlight exposure to where your collections are, you can consider paint on the windows. Yes, I said paint. Adding paint could help reduce the light, or even adding sheets of paper, which will be more reversible than the paint, can give you the same effect of helping to reduce that UV light exposure from sunlight. Now, also in the Rare Book Room, unlike the rest of the building, the lights can be controlled at the location. So they are switched off whenever the room is not in use. So you can swap out fluorescent and incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs. Not only do LED bulbs help to save energy and reduce your electricity bill, but they also emit less UV light than the other types of bulbs. Now, maybe you can't change your bulbs, so think of perhaps installing motion sensors or timers so that whenever the room is empty, those lights will actually switch off, or when someone comes into the space, that they will switch on. That could be an option as well. Now, measures to control dust need not be very expensive. Now, dust accumulation, the problem with it is that it's very attractive to insects, as it provides nutrients that insects would like. Also, dust holds moisture and mold spores. Our collections can suffer abrasion or scratches from those large particles of dust as well. And dust, when it settles, can cause soiling on the surface of some of our collection items. Now, it has an unsightly appearance as well. So by having a very dusty collection, you're lowering the aesthetic value of your collection. And once dust is ingrained in the surface of paper and other very porous surfaces, it cannot be completely removed as easily as you might for wiping a desk or a bookshelf. So prevention is always going to be better than the cure in this situation. So be sure that there are filters on your AC units. Sometimes we might have a cost-cutting measure here where the filters are not reinstalled upon their inspection or upon their maintenance. So let's be sure that the filters are on our AC units. They can help capture that dust, capture the mold spores from the incoming and the circulating air. You want to also keep doors and windows closed unless they are a part of the ventilation that you need for your space. Remember, we were talking about keeping that air flowing. Unless it's for that purpose, you really want to keep your doors and windows closed. And consider adding screens to your windows to help reduce the dust if it is that you do have to keep windows for that open for that purpose. Now, we will share in our webinar resources the link to our webinar that was done on dust. It has a lot of information. We delve into exactly the composition of dust and a lot of measures that you can take for reducing dust and its impact on your collections. Now, at the room level, we would want to maintain an ideal environment for our collections. And I'm not going to mention a particular temperature here because overall, what we would want to have happen is that we want you to have cool temperatures and low humidity. Humidity referring to the moisture in the air at a consistent level as possible. But how would you actually know the environmental conditions and whether or not they're in that desired range of being nice and consistently cool temperatures, nice and low humidity? How would we know? So we recommend that you can monitor the environmental conditions with data loggers or temperature and humidity monitors. Though some of these I know are a pricier investment, the move to install them within your collection spaces can pay off in the long term because they can help you diagnose problems in this space or problems that you're having in the building. Now, there are many data loggers and environmental monitors on the market. So in our webinar resources that we'll email to you, we're going to add some helpful links and articles that would speak on how do you make that decision on choosing an environmental monitor for your purposes. So as we discussed, light can be very damaging to our collections. So we're heading back to the pools. We'd want you to tell us in the pool, which of these room level of control will you consider implementing to protect your collection from light? Now enter your choice. Would you consider window treatments? And that's going to include blinds, curtains, the film, painting, paper. Would you consider switching off the lights whenever the room is not in use, or maybe installing motion detectors that would automatically come on? How about switching to the LED bulbs? Which of these would you consider implementing for your institution? Yes, we're seeing the votes coming in. We have a couple of things that are tied. Select the ones that are pertinent to you. You can select multiple if you think there are more than one that you would want to install. Great. Thank you so very much, everyone, for voting. Let me share the results. We have a tie for folks saying that they would implement window treatments as well as switch to LED bulbs. Great. And coming in second would be switching off the lights. good. And a few of you said that you would install motion detectors. Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that these are some of the measures you see fit for your institution and your particular situation there with your collection. So what are some of the storage level of control that we can consider? So let's consider shelving. So typical shelving options for collection items have included wood. We can have powder-coated steel and even plastic shelving. Now, powder-coated steel shelving is the top recommendation because of its durability, and it also has no damaging effects or interactions with our shelf materials. However, we know that upgrading shelving is a very expensive venture. So you may have to do the best you can with what you have currently. So do you have wooden shelves? The concern with this type of shelving is that the wood can off-gas harmful chemicals, which can damage collections. Coating the wood with a moisture-borne polyurethane or latex or even acrylic paints could help at least prevent this damaging off-gassing from direct uncoated wood. You can also consider lining that wooden shelves with a sheet of aluminum or perhaps glass or even plexiglass. Those are some good options for creating a really nice barrier away from the wood that could give harmful off-gassing to your collection, but still allow for the collection to be shelved on the wooden shelves which you have. So that's a cheaper option than completely replacing the entire shelving. Now, placing your collection items in protective enclosures is a major preservation strategy. In fact, protective enclosures bring great value to your collection as they serve multiple functions. They can reduce abrasion and physical handling to your collection items. They protect items from contaminants like dust, fingerprints, and other pollutants. They protect light. They protect the items from light and from UV. They help to reduce that fluctuation that you may have with respect to RH or relative humidity. They also provide physical support and chemical protection. This includes for very thin, small, and fragile or limp and oddly shaped items. You get protection when they are being handled, and it protects also any of the adjacent volumes from damaging each other while they're being shelved. Now, in the event of a minor disaster, protective enclosures can help shield from smoke following a small fire. They also help protect from an increase in relative humidity that you might have after a power outage, for instance. They protect items from water damage when a leak occurs. And even when you have a fall happening, maybe even during an earthquake, you would find that the protective enclosure is what takes the brunt of the damage away from the item itself. So do not underestimate the value of a protective enclosure. Now, I know and I understand that we may not be able to buy the expensive or the acid-free enclosures that are recommended for that long-term preservation. So you may need to get creative. Let's explore some creative options. Now, if you're unable to swap out all of the acidic enclosures that you already have within your collection, you can't just go about buying all new and putting in the good quality items. Consider placing a separator between the object and the poor quality item. We can interleave with paper. We can consider using film, even maybe tissue is also a good option. Those things can help provide a barrier for our item away from the poor quality enclosure that we may have. Now, tying and wrapping volumes or bindings help improve their stability. And this is really important for things that may be partially damaged, maybe the covers have issues, etc. So wrapping helps provide some stability. It provides some protection from light and dust. And yes, I know we see brown paper there. It is not ideal given that it's not an acid-free material, but sometimes something is better than nothing. And in this case, we're wrapping newspapers, which in of themselves are also a relatively poor quality material. So maybe you don't have the materials or you don't have the expertise for people to create boxes for pamphlets or for periodicals, for instance. What we often have happening is that they're simply added to these magazine holders, and unfortunately, they can get out of shape because they're not given that support. What you can do, an alternative to putting them in an enclosure, is to tie them together, but place boards at their ends to help stiffen and support them in storage. Now, this, again, a temporary measure, but one that can at least allow for the items to stand flat while remaining in the magazine holders. Or perhaps you have bookends that are ill-fitted to the shelf items. We see a sort of weirdly shaped bookend and a relatively tiny book here. Now, what you can do is to add a large book-size board to the bookend in order to extend the support. So the items, yes, are supported, are held upright, but they're not being impacted by the narrow, sharp edge of the bookends that are involved there. And maybe you have discarded tubes from textiles or newsprint rolls. Those can be used to protect roll items that we're unable to store as completely flat because we're limited in the space. At least putting them into a tube helps to give that support. Now, covers for the entire shelf might be a more feasible option than housing individual items, especially if you have a collection that has multiple tiny things that are all shelved together. So consider Tyvek or a breathable textile fabric. For instance, brown cotton is a good one as well to help protect the items from light and dust. But the reason we want it to be breathable is that it allows for stable temperature and relative humidity. Have a look at our Protective Enclosures webinar to help you consider the materials and the type of enclosures for library and archival collection. We went through the enclosure options for flat documents, for books, oversized items like maps, photographs, and even objects. Now, we know purchasing ready-made preservation materials may not be a feasible option. It could be expensive. So tell us, which of these creative storage measures would you consider for your collection? You can go ahead and enter your choice in the poll that you see on your screen. Will you consider tying and wrapping bindings? Maybe adding the supports, the pamphlets, as you saw us in that image. Maybe adding boards to bookends. You have bookends that might be too small or just not able to provide all that support. How about covering the entire shelf, especially if you have multiple items that need to be protected, but you can't house them all? Which of these options would you consider? You can enter your choice in the poll on your screen. Yeah. Now, again, remember, you can add as many or as little as you think would be a feasible option for your institution. We would love to hear. Excellent. So let's see what the results say. we have a majority indicating that they would add supports to pamphlets, 74%, and 71% think that they can implement tying and wrapping their bindings to help provide some additional support as well as to protect them from light. We are adding boards to bookends. I know we've probably inherited a number of bookends that are not ideal for some of the things we want shelved. So adding boards to bookends, 65%, that's a good option. And 41% say that they would consider covering the shelves. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now Anna will continue to highlight what we can do at the collection item level of control. So Anna.
Thank you, Daniel. When it comes to the collection item, there are several things we can implement. But first, do you know your collection? Do you know what and where they are? What are their conditions? Know your collection so you can prioritize preservation and collection care needs. We must accept that we won't be able to give each item in our collection the exact level of collection care. Our budgets might allow us to buy a limited number of enclosures, or we may be limited by the time we can spend on carrying out preservation activities on items. How do we prioritize your selection of collections for preservation treatment? Here's a few tips in an acronym I like to call Mr. FA or MRFA. M, market value and possibility of theft. So you must consider your market value. R, rarity of item and availability of replacement copies. F, fragility of hard copy or original documents. A, aesthetic values. One of the most impactful things you can do for your collection item is to implement good care and handling practices. Here are a few low-cost ones to consider. Remove paper clips / metal fasteners as they can permanently damage your collection items as they rust and degrade. If you can entirely avoid metal paper clips, add a strip of paper below to separate it from the item. So you could add the strip of paper to ease taking off the paper clip. Also, you could use the plastic paper clip to replace it. Speaking of separation, interleaving degrading documents with sheets of acid-free paper can act as a support of items as they are handling and can be a sacrificial barrier, helping to absorb the brunt of acid components. Handle collections with clean hands. However, use gloves with photograph or film. When removing a book from the shelf, do not pull it out, as you see in the picture there, by its head or end cap, which can break or tear. Either push the two neighboring books back in order to grab the spine in the middle, or stretch a finger along the top edge of the book and rock it forward in order to grab the spine. Keeping your collection clean need not to be complicated. Using a soft microfiber cloth or a dust magnetic cloth, remove the dust from a book, starting along the edges of the pages. Hold the book tightly close while cleaning to ensure that the dust does not go down between the pages of the book. Be sure to view our webinar on care and handling for more information. So as Ms. Fraser had stated earlier, when you get the link, you can view our care and handling webinar. Here's our next poll. Which of these collection level of control would you consider implementing? Enter your choice in the poll on the screen. All right, thank you for entering your answers. So we see coming in first place, 85%, remove paper clips and fasteners. Second, clean with microfiber cloth at 76%. Thirdly, prioritize for preservation, 51%. And fourth place, interleaving documents at 49%. Thank you for sharing. The final level of control we'll highlight might be considered the one able to give a good bang for the buck. That is policy and procedure. Implementing a preservation policy can seem overwhelming. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Implement small changes over time. The purpose of a preservation policy is to outline guidelines for selection, housing, authorized access, use, care and handling, and collection maintenance. We have covered some of these before, but let's look at authorized access. Only authorized personnel should be permitted to have access to the collection areas. Requests for the use or loan of collections should always be authorized in writing. Keep a log of the usage. These checks and balances help to ensure no theft of valuable items. One aspect of care and handling you should include in your policy is the restriction of food and beverages. Yes, we must keep food and beverages away from our collections. This measure helps keep pests away from your treasured items. Collection maintenance is key. Write into your policy that your collections and collection spaces should be evaluated every 3 to 6 months to look for signs of degradation issues and determine what type of treatment is necessary based on assessment. These regular walkthroughs and inspections are a major preventative preservation measure. Your policy should also include your disaster preparedness and response plan. Don't you know where to start? Our webinar, Write That Disaster Plan, can help walk you through the process and provides a number of free resources. To better know which measures to implement with your collection, you should evaluate and mitigate risks. Determine your institution and collections vulnerabilities, then begin taking measures to prevent and protect through risk mitigation to minimize damage. See more details and guidelines in our webinars, Reduce the Risk, Part 1, 2, and 3. All these you will get in the link from Ms. Fraser after the webinar. Don't reinvent the wheel. Network with your colleagues who are most likely facing the same preservation challenges. Participatory activities through membership organization are a great opportunity to connect, commiserate, and share solutions. Don't underestimate the value of collaborations. Finally, we know professional training for conservation and preservation are not readily attained in our local or regional settings. So we encourage you to seek out free training opportunities for you and your staff. There are a number of online resources, including webinars and online courses, which introduce participants to theory and practice of preserving library and archival collections. Perhaps you are not sure where to start or where to tune in for free training opportunities. We have covered. As you see on your screen, we have our upcoming webinar, Resource Roundup, top preservation websites, platform, and channels on Wednesday, May 22nd at 10:30 a.m. So please register for this webinar. Here's our final poll. Which of these policy procedure level of control would you consider for your institution? Enter your choice in the poll seen on your screen. Thank you, participants. Coming in first, we have at 84%, care and handling. Second, disaster preparedness and response plan. Actually, we have a tie. Disaster preparedness and response plan, collection maintenance. Coming in right after that is training. And lastly, risk evaluation and mitigation. Thank you for your responses. Thank you for attending our webinar, Nil to Low Cost Collection Care. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or to email the library conservator. You will receive an email today with the webinar resources and a brief survey. Your feedback is important to us. We look forward to your responses. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll have our question and answer segment now. Let's just go see if we do have any questions coming in. With respect to that question on links to the training, I'll want you to be sure to join us in our resource roundup May 22nd on Wednesday. I have tapped into a number of online training resources that I'm going to be very excited to share with you in that webinar. So be sure to join us and you'll get an insight into all of the available things that are out there as it relates to preservation. And when we say top preservation websites, we're looking at things that we have personally used for our work here at the Preservation and Conservation Lab, or even things that we know are from reputable sources as well. As librarians, that's always one of the key things that we're looking at. And we apply that even to preservation and conservation by looking for things that are reputable by way of how do we tap into resources online by websites, platforms, and channels. Looking at the other questions that we have, just getting to them all. Someone says, you mentioned magnetic dust cloths. Where do you get these? Now, the microfiber cloths are a really good option as well, in the sense of the fibers of the microfiber cloth can help capture the dust. And that's what we really want. We don't want that you're using one of those feather dusters. That simply just moves the dust around and recirculates it so that it lands on another collection item somewhere. By using a microfiber cloth or those cloths that are designated as magnetic dust cloths, you are sure to capture the cloth. So the microfiber cloths are ones that are typically sold with cleaning supplies. You would want to be sure that any cloths that you're using for the purpose of cleaning, that you have them designated as cleaning only or collection items. Don't have it wiping down the kitchen, wiping down the desk, the chairs and the furniture, and then also wiping your collection items. Let's keep them exclusively for that purpose. And the magnetic dust cloths we've actually purchased in the past from some online vendors, including Gaylord. So question, does the Heritage Library have a disaster preparedness plan? I believe we do have a disaster preparedness plan, but the fact that someone from our Heritage Library is asking that question, it would mean that we do have to refresh on that, and we have to be sure that everyone is aware of that plan and that it is thoroughly updated. Next question, would we be able to have physical training as it pertains to damaged items, handling items with mold, etc.? That's a great question. Something that we are considering having our regular training. We did have some workshops available available last year, but this is definitely a topic that I want you to include in our feedback forms. By giving that information in our feedback forms, we are able to compile them and take them up to our higher authorities in order to get those permissions and indicate that there's a need, that there's a desire, that people do want us to carry out those other topics or those other training opportunities. Is there local funding for NGOs to acquire low-cost collection care equipment? I am not aware of funding or grants available for that particular purpose, but at the resource roundup, we're going to mention one particular grant avenue for as it relates to digitization. But I'm going to take a hold of that question and explore. I don't know of anything right off the bat for helping NGOs, particularly with respect to collection care equipment. A lot of funding or grant funding, etc., has to be spent on a particular avenue or direction. And I'm not sure if there's one exclusively for the low-cost collection care equipment. So good question, something to have us explore. Can we get a sample policy that outlines details on the different elements mentioned in the presentation? That's something that I will have to just be sure that we can have permission with respect to sharing that document. But definitely there are a number of reputable institutions worldwide that have publicly shared their preservation policies as well. Question, do you have a template for a collection care policy for us to use as a small library? Okay, so I think training with respect to policy writing, or at least considerations for putting together a preservation related policy or collection care policy, is one that we should consider. Yes. Thank you for the idea. And again, be sure to include it in the feedback form that you will be emailed that link today. Getting that feedback down, getting those ideas as to things you would want to see us do in the future really does help us guide on the things that we have coming up. So thank you so very much for your question on that. And I believe that would be all of the questions. So again, I hope we see you at our next webinar, May 22nd, where we look at resources as they relate to preservation. Join us for our resource roundup. We will send you the link for registering, along with all the other links and references that were made in this webinar that will be emailed to you, as well as our feedback form. We look forward to hearing from you. We look forward to also having you join us next month. Thank you so very much for all of your questions and your participation.